Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Room for Everyone. How was that feeling of like finding your audience on Wattpad?
How was it? It was surreal. It was very surreal. Like the wadis and everything was like a storm. Everything happened so fast. Because before the wadis, I hadn't really engaged with Wattpad too much, so I didn't even really know the community. I didn't know how vast it was. But yeah, ever since then, I've made like so many friends, made so many connections. Obviously, I'm here talking to such lovely people now. So yeah, it's been a magical ride.
That's amazing. Mariana, do you have anything to add to this as well?
Yes. So my writing journey started many moons ago. I won't say how many because that will age me. But it started on anime fan fiction. So this is from, a Japanese animated show with Japanese characters. And the stories that people were writing with their own characters and the original cast showed mostly white people or very white passing. The names, the locations. And I was still in Venezuela back then and actually teaching myself English through fan fiction. And I was like, well, if I want people to read my story, which is already going to have very, very weird English, then I should create a character that sounds white. It took me many years to unlearn that behavior and to realize that I could write my own people into my stories. And maybe the audience would be smaller, but it would be the right audience. So finally, fast forward a bunch of years later, when I joined Wattpad and started posting my stories. My first story, the on Wattpad, the female lead is also a white girl, but the love interest is a Venezuelan guy. And that was my very subtle way to introduce Venezuelan culture through the lens of this white girl who is going to fall in love with a Venezuelan guy. Because that's what I wanted my readers to experience. That's how I wanted them to start getting on board with the rest of my stories that were going to be progressively more Venezuelanized. So I did that. I'm very happy with how it's turned out. I am honestly every day so shocked by the audience that I have built, and in the fact that people from all over the world are reading my stories and they're relating to them because at the end of the day, they're stories about people.
Right. That's amazing. What an interesting strategy that you use to write about those Venezuelan nuances through the gaze of a white character. I thought that was really interesting.
And
And
very sneaky.
very sneaky and very clever. Um, Rami, I did not ask about your experience first writing on Wattpad. Would you like to share that with us as well?
Sorry, are you asking me? My internet is cutting out a little bit.
Yes, I'm asking you, like, what was it like writing on Wattpad for the first time?
It was great, actually. So I had self-published before. So I know you guys were talking about, did you change yourself to break in early on? I did not. And as a result, I was rejected like over 100 times by literary agents because it was at a time when vampire books were all the rage. Twilight. Everybody was writing the next Twilight, right? And here was I with this book about a South Asian character who has a year to fall in love because she doesn't want to be with the guy her parents have chose for her, right? And I was not going to give her a thirst for blood. Like she was not going to be a vampire. I refused to do that. So yeah, I was rejected. And so then I learned about self-publishing. I self-published the first book soon after there was a sequel. And then I thought, okay, how can I actually reach people? Because I don't have a platform. So Amazon lets you make a book free if it's exclusive. So I'm like, okay, let's try that. First book free, gateway drug into the sequel, make good royalties on the sequel. This is a good marketing strategy. And it was phenomenal. Just, I was reaching people that I would have never expected to reach, which is very similar to Wattpad in that way. you know, like there would be a mom of 2 in Texas reading my book, sending me a message on Facebook. And it just, that made me believe, like, that was the moment where I was like, you know, there are commonalities, like there are universal themes. People just want to find love. People want to feel seen, and people can enjoy stories from different cultures. And that's when I knew I had to keep going. And soon after, I was approached by Wattpad. They had seen my book reviewed on a book blog, and the platform was just starting out at the time. Also, I am aging myself by revealing that. Yeah, so then we talked, and I posted the story there. And, you know, that's when I found the amazing community of Wattpad, and the readers are just so amazing. Their comments, like, they're so enthusiastic. They're also very, you know, honest, and they'll let you know how they feel, but it's like a good space. And it's just a great way to connect with people. And yeah, I've been on Wattpad ever since, and that was a long time ago. So.
That's amazing. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed listening to was the fact that all of you folks have this access to your readers that maybe some traditionally published authors may not be able to have. So would you say that going this route and sharing your stories on Wattpad does give you this access to have a relationship with your readers?
It definitely does. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say that because I actually had a reader to reach out to me recently, and it was actually in the context of, I think it was Evelyn, who said sometimes we can be really scared about the stories that we dive into because we don't want to have that feedback that says, oh, you missed the mark. Lead Me Astray features a non-binary character, and I had a reader to reach out to me directly in the comments and say, listen, I unlocked this book specifically to read this book, and I am disappointed. And it was hurtful. I'm like, what do you mean you're disappointed? And he says, well, listen, are they? I'm not sure of their gender because they didn't identify themselves, but they say, well, I chose this book because it features non-binary and trans characters. And here we are talking about this non-binary character's genitalia. Now, without giving too much away with that story, and also in context with our audience, there were things within the book that required the particular thing that I was talking about there. But with this particular character, it was necessary. And yet the conversation with my reader and having that very human experience of someone saying, this is how this scene impacted me personally. This is how this scene has missed the mark for me personally, allowed me to step back and look at that scene from a fresh pair of eyes. And although it was the right choice for that particular book, it does let me know that as I move forward with other types of books, I have to think about this from the lens of my readers as well. And that's the empathy that Mariana was talking about, but we also have to remember that sometimes empathy requires you to be able to step into the shoes of the other person, and there are just going to be some spaces in which we can't do that. So having that access to our readers allows us to, when we can't see the wall in the way of our experience and theirs, the reader can speak for themselves. They can say directly, this is working, this is not working. And in that way, we can craft much more authentic stories, taking care to meet the needs of our readers while also still sharing the perspectives that we intend to share.
Yeah, and that gives inclusive storytelling a whole new meaning. It's not just about writing or adding certain characters or having the nuances, but the fact that you're able to actually hear from your writers and say, hey, you know, I'm not really feeling this scene, or hey, I really love this scene. It made me feel this way. I think that is just amazing. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yep, I was just going to add that having that immediate access to your readers will definitely help you develop a thick skin, which is actually a very good skill to have in the book world at large, whether it's on Wattpad or other digital platforms, on self-publishing, indie publishing, and traditional publishing. Regardless of your level of exposure to readers, you will face rejection at every single step of the way. And it's just absolutely beautiful, in my opinion, to have that access on Wattpad and the ability to build community And readers, yes, they will let you know for sure if they're disappointed or if something has made them upset, but it will also make you both a better writer and a better person.
Definitely. So we have a few minutes left. Evelyn, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to say that it's like having telepathy, really. It's something that I think traditional authors will never really be able to experience. You get to follow readers in real time as they read through your work, and they post their thoughts in real time. And you know, you just spend the entire day just kind of reading through their comments, kind of going like, oh, 2 hours ago they were on chapter 2, and now they're on chapter 4, and you know, so it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So we have some questions from the chat. Rodney says, I'd like to know how you include diversity in your writing, especially when including a small cast of characters. Also, how do you subvert the tropes you include in your stories? Oh, sorry, this is from Joanne. I can repeat the question as well. How do you include diversity in your writing, especially when including a small cast of characters? And then how do you subvert the tropes?
Well, I actually write polyamorous romance, so it makes it really easy in some ways because I always start off with 3 to 4 main characters anyway, and so it gives me the space to where whether we're talking about different races and ethnicities, or multicultural characters, or people of different genders, or different sexualities, those 3 characters give me the space to play with that in many, many different ways. I try to subvert tropes by, first of all, every trope, whether I, especially as a ghostwriter, whether I was writing something that was specific to the genre that I liked or writing something specific to what my client asked for. I think that as an author, subverting tropes is really the name of the game anyway. And I do that personally by making sure that I'm approaching the trope itself. So, for example, 2 Friends, 1 Bed, still within or from the lens of the characters who are very different from who I am. So how I might do that trope in my own personal life won't really matter, and that's why I can do it differently for every single book, because my characters are going to respond so differently based on their background, based on their expectations of the other characters within the book.
Does anyone else have any special ways where they subvert tropes in their writing?
Yes, subverting tropes is all about having fun. So you know what the tropes are, you know how they typically go. How would you enjoy seeing that trope in your story? Or, as Marie Kondo said, what sparks joy to you?
Yeah, I think it's definitely about joy. And I feel like from my perspective, there's just flat out some rom-com tropes that I don't like and I don't enjoy. I was talking about this on TikTok last week. And so in this book, 24 Hours in Paris, for example, you could easily call it enemies to lovers. And I just don't get that. We're adults. I don't have time for actual enemies. Like, what is that? So I changed it and I was like, well, you know what? It's going to be that they haven't interacted a lot. Like, they're 2 coworkers who basically missed their flight and they're stuck together for 24 hours in Paris. So I'm like, instead of having them hate each other, which just would not feel authentic to me, because all the years I spent working in the corporate world, like, that would not have been sustainable. Like, HR would have been called. I can't hate my coworkers. So why don't I just make it that they are, their personalities are pretty different and they haven't interacted a lot. So initially, maybe they find each other a little annoying and then it changes. And so that's how it had to be for me in order to feel like something I would enjoy. So I think, as Mariana was saying, like, coming from the place of joy, and sometimes that flat out means just veering left and not doing the trope.
Right. And even when you were describing a little bit of your plot, that sounds way more interesting than like the enemies.
Thank you.
So I agree. We have another question from Clarissa. Which genre seems to be lacking in diversity right now? I'll leave it there.
All of them. 100% all of them.
I agree.
And also, like, I've been reading a lot of crime thrillers. I have to say crime thrillers, big time, because it's always like the detective partners. It's always like the gruff, troubled white male, and then the younger detective a female, always white, and but she's a feminist, and that's great, but like, let's add something more to the mix in that dynamic. I would love to see some more diversity in crime thrillers.
Definitely. Anyone else want to jump in on that question? Okay, so we have a couple more minutes, not very much, but if anyone wants to jump in, feel free. What is some advice you have for new authors who are trying to get this right?
Keep going, keep going, keep going. I've heard from someone once before, writing is like, deciding you want to do homework for the rest of your life. And it really is. You will be doing homework for the rest of your life. But here's the thing. Writing is the kind of homework that gives back to you. You actually get to visibly see yourself. You get to go back and read something you wrote, a year ago and say, oh my God, did I write that? And then something you wrote 5 years ago and say, oh my God, did I write that? But you see the progress, you see yourself getting better, but that only happens if you keep doing it. If you decide, oh, I didn't hit my benchmarks for this year. I intended to sub to, this amount of different publications and I didn't do it, or I didn't get accepted, or I got rejected in some way, and you stop there. You never get to look back and say, wow, look what I did 5 years ago versus now, because there won't be a now. So my primary advice to all writers is, it doesn't matter whether you think you're succeeding. You're not looking for one big break. It actually happens in a series of a bunch of little tiny moments that you don't even notice, but you'll look up and have the career you want if you just keep going.
Definitely. That was great advice. Anyone else?
Yep. My advice is, we have essentially in this panel written a dissertation on the topic. Watch it, rewatch it, and rewatch it again. All the great advice is here. And of course, if you have any other questions, comments, suggestions, or you just want to chat, you are always welcome to reach out to any of us on Wattpad, on social media. We're here for you.
I think that is a great way to wrap up this amazing conversation. I just want to thank each of you for really just being vulnerable and sharing your experiences. I think this will be very helpful for people who want to write diverse and inclusive stories. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.